Madam Gündoğan.
Thank you. While listening, I had to think of Jean Tirole, who won the Nobel Prize for Market Power and Regulation, and with his brilliant book, Economics for the Common Good, and I think I read it a few years ago. But what he does very eloquently in his book, and I think that's one of the reasons why he got the Nobel Prize for, is that we can price everything. We can put a price on animal welfare. We can put a price on social justice. We can put a price on carbon dioxide. And all of those things that we can do, which is macroeconomically been, I think, proven that it will affect countries which have stepped forward in trying to do so, have seen the first things, because you try to change behavior. And I think that is the critical thing here, because economics is also partly a psychological thing. So you have to offer something. You need to stick in the carrot. So that's why I'm looking at Ms. Baarsma, is that how can we get that thinking more effectively in our politics? Because there's still a sort of resistance against it, to price externalities that we dislike and want to get rid of.
Well, thank you for your question. This is actually why I said we have never even tried green growth. You might call it green growth. There are OECD programs, there are other programs that are called green growth, but it's not green growth, because we have never done what you are now putting on the table, and that's putting price tags on things that are valuable but not priced within our system. And if we would do that, and yes, it might be an unpopular if you do that in isolation. But if you use, as I said before, the tax revenues that come from a carbon tax, a biodiversity tax, and so on, and even have a negative income tax to also account for, let's say, voluntary work and so on, then you have a different story. Then it's a package that may very well give people who are more vulnerable, who have less money to spend, to give them the idea that they can profit from this. Because they get more money to spend, and then they can choose for themselves what to spend it on. And that's why I'm, at this point in time, a little bit worried about what we have now in the Dutch politics. We have a climate and transition fund of, let's say, $35 billion. We have a nitrogen fund of $25 billion, a mobility fund, $7.5 billion, a science fund, $5 billion, by the way, very good fund. And there are other funds I don't need to get up. So we have the carrot is there, but there is no stick. So where is all this money going? Well, in the wrong directions. I completely agree with Jason there. We need to put incentives there. We need to have a stick that steers all of that money that's very needed for the transitions that we face, but put it in the right directions. And yes, putting price tags on things is part of that, but having those public funds is another part of it. Having a negative income tax is part of it. Having setting standards, quite strict standards, is also part of it.
Thank you, and I'm so glad to see again that we agree on the importance of justice here. I think that's critical. On the question of pricing, I think that there's an elephant in the room we're not discussing, and that is that why have adequate prices not been imposed or adopted? The reason is because they make it more expensive for corporations to accumulate, right? It works against capital accumulation. And that is why in a growth-oriented capitalist society, there's heavy pressure against adequate pricing of nature or carbon or whatever you might want to say, right? For the very same reason, there's heavy pressure against wage improvements, right? It's the same dynamic that's at stake. Capitalism, in order to maintain perpetual accumulation, requires cheapening nature and labor. There's heavy pressure against that. So if we want to relieve ourselves from that pressure, we need to start shifting towards a post-capitalist, post-growth economy, where we can more properly value nature and labor without that kind of constant pressure to cheapen. And so this idea of like, we just have to keep banging on the drums of pricing and magically, eventually this will occur. No, there's heavy pressure against it and for reasons that have to do with the structural features of our economy.
If I may ask something to Jay, if you don't think that corporates will accept pricing, why do you think they will accept the new system that you...
I'm not asking corporations to accept it. I'm suggesting that democratically we shift in this direction, right? So I think that's the key difference, I think.
Mr. de Jong.